My son called me for the last time on a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because I was in the middle of a wire transfer 340,000 moving from one account to another and I let it ring. I thought, I'll call back in 10 minutes. That was 19 years ago. He never called again. I am 92 years old. I have 2.4 million sitting in accounts I no longer have the energy to spend. I have a house with 4 bathrooms and I use one. I have a car I haven't driven since 2019. And I have a son somewhere in Portland, Oregon, whose birthday I still remember, March 14th, and who has not spoken a word to me since he was 31 years old. I am not here to warn you. Warnings are for people who still think they are different from me. You are not different from me. You are me, 20 or 30 or 40 years earlier, sitting where I once sat, feeling exactly what I once felt, that certainty, that electric hum in the chest when a deal closes, when the number goes up, when you think, this is it, this is the one that changes everything. I know that feeling better than I know my own son's voice, and that is precisely the problem. What I am going to tell you is not a lesson. Lessons are comfortable. What I am going to tell you is what it actually looks like from the inside, up close, when a man trades his family for a number on a screen, and doesn't realize he's done it until the screen goes dark and the house goes quiet and the only sound left is the hum of a refrigerator in a kitchen where no one sits anymore. I built 3 companies. I sold 2 of them. The third one I ran for 31 years until my body told me, quite plainly, that it was finished. At my peak, and I say this not to impress you but because the number matters, because the number is the whole point, I was clearing 180,000 a month. Net. I had 11 people whose salaries I signed every 2 weeks, a driver named Gerald who knew my coffee order better than my wife did, and a calendar so full that my assistant color-coded it in 4 different shades just to tell the meetings apart. I also had a son who taught himself to ride a bike on a Saturday afternoon because I was in Phoenix closing a deal that turned out, 4 years later, to mean absolutely nothing. He taught himself. My wife told me over the phone that evening, her voice carrying something I was too busy to name at the time. He fell 12 times, she said. Got up 12 times. Did it alone. I said, that's great, that's my boy. Then I went back to dinner with men whose names I cannot remember today. The thing about losing a family slowly is that it doesn't feel like loss while it's happening. It feels like postponement. There is a difference, and the difference is everything, and you will not understand it until it is too late to matter. For years, and I mean years, not weeks, not a rough season, I operated on a system I never once questioned. The system was simple: now was for work, and later was for everything else. Later was for the vacation we kept rescheduling. Later was for the father-son fishing trip I'd been promising since Daniel was 8 years old. Later was for the conversation my wife Margaret kept starting at the dinner table on the rare evenings I was actually home, the one where her voice would go careful and quiet, the way a person speaks when they've rehearsed what they're going to say and are terrified of the answer. I never let her finish that conversation. Not once. Not in 11 years of her trying. I would check my watch. Or my pager. This was the 90s, we had pagers. Or I would remember something, some call I hadn't returned, and I would hold up one finger, the universal sign, for one moment, and I would leave the table. And Margaret would sit there with whatever she had been about to say still in her mouth, swallowed back down, and by the time I returned she would be clearing the plates and the moment would be gone and neither of us would acknowledge that it had existed at all. This happened so many times that it stopped feeling like a failure and started feeling like weather. Just the way things were. Just the climate of our marriage. I want you to understand what our house looked like from the outside during those years, because the outside is what I believed was real. From the outside, a 4-bedroom colonial in Connecticut, freshly painted every 3 years, a lawn that Gerald's cousin mowed on Thursdays. A wife who dressed beautifully and smiled at the company Christmas party and never once embarrassed me. A son who got good grades, played baseball, had friends. A family photo on the wall of my office, all 3 of us at the Cape, 1991, that clients would sometimes point to and say, "Beautiful family, Richard." And I would nod and feel, genuinely feel, a surge of pride. That photo was taken 6 months after Margaret had sat me down. This time she'd waited until Daniel was at a sleepover. She had planned it. I understand now how much courage that took, and told me she was disappearing. Not leaving. Disappearing. "I am becoming someone I don't recognize," she said, "and I don't think you've noticed." I told her things would change after the Henderson contract closed. The Henderson contract closed in February 1992. Nothing changed. I want to tell you about one specific morning, because abstract suffering is easy to dismiss, and I will not let you dismiss this. It was a Wednesday in November, 1994. Daniel was 14. I had been traveling for 9 of the previous 14 days: Boston, then Dallas, then back to Boston, and I came home late on a Tuesday night after he was already asleep. The next morning I came downstairs at 6:15 to get to the office early, and Daniel was already at the kitchen table. Not eating. Just sitting. In his baseball uniform, which made no sense because it was Wednesday morning in November. I said, "Why are you in your uniform?" He looked at me for a moment, and I have spent 19 years trying to describe what was in that look, and I still can't do it exactly. And he said, "State championships were Saturday, Dad." Saturday. I had missed it entirely. Not forgotten to attend. Forgotten it had existed. He didn't say it with anger. That's what I couldn't process. He said it the way you state a fact about the weather. Flat. Settled. Like a boy who has already completed the work of adjusting his expectations and no longer needs anything from the adjustment. He folded his uniform on the table, went upstairs, and came back down in his school clothes. I stood in that kitchen for a long time after he left. I did not call Margaret. I did not change anything. I went to the office at 6:45, and by 8 o'clock I was on a call with a client in London, and the morning closed over that kitchen moment like water over a stone. But the stone was there. It stayed there. And everything that came after was built on top of it. Scene 1, 1997. Daniel is 17. Margaret had started working again, a small interior design firm, 3 employees, an office above a dry cleaner on Elm Street. I remember thinking it was fine, it was good for her, something to keep her occupied. I said those words to my brother on the phone, something to keep her occupied. As if she were a child with a puzzle. As if 38 years of intelligence and energy had been patiently waiting for my permission to exist. Her business made $94,000 in its second year. More than that, she was alive in a way I hadn't seen in a decade. She came home talking about clients, about fabric samples, about a brownstone renovation in the city she was designing from scratch. Her eyes were different. Lit from somewhere I hadn't put there and couldn't take credit for. I missed it completely. I saw it the way you see wallpaper: present, registered, unremarkable. That same year I cleared 2.1 million. My best year to that point. I bought a boat I used 4 times and sold 3 years later for half the price. I remember the boat clearly. I remember its name forward because I chose it myself. I cannot remember a single conversation with my wife from that entire year. Not one. 12 months of marriage and I could not pull up a single exchange if my life required it. She wasn't gone yet. But she was practicing. Scene 2 2001. Daniel is 21. We had 4 days. 4 days in the same house, the three of us, for the first time in nearly 2 years. I had promised Margaret, actually promised, written it in my calendar in red, the only red block in 6 months of scheduling, that I would be present. No calls during meals. No disappearing to the office on Friday. I lasted until Thursday morning. A deal I had been working for 8 months was suddenly collapsing. A partner in Chicago had gotten cold feet and was threatening to pull out entirely, taking $600,000 of committed capital with him. My phone started at 7 a.m. and did not stop. I took the calls. All of them. I took them in my office with the door closed, then in the car in the driveway so Margaret wouldn't hear, then walking laps around the backyard in the November cold, my breath coming out in clouds, talking and talking and talking to men in Chicago about money. Daniel found me on one of those laps. He stood at the back door in his socks, just his socks, on the cold stone step watching me. I held up one finger. He went inside. At dinner that evening he was polite in the way that is worse than anger. Passing dishes. Answering questions in full sentences. Thanking his mother for the food. I watched him perform the role of a son at Thanksgiving dinner and I understood, somewhere beneath the noise of the Chicago deal still running in my head, that he had stopped expecting anything from me and had moved on to simply managing my presence. I was a weather condition he had learned to dress for. The Chicago deal closed in January. I made $340,000 on it. I do not remember a single number from Daniel's college transcript. I never asked. Scene 3 2004. Margaret leaves? Not dramatically. That's the thing I was not prepared for. I had imagined, in the abstract way you imagine disasters that aren't yet real, that if Margaret ever left it would be a scene. An argument that finally cracked open all the years of careful silence. Shouting, maybe. Doors. Something cinematic that would at least confirm the weight of what was happening. Instead she left on a Tuesday afternoon in March while I was at the office. She left a note on the kitchen counter, 3 paragraphs, handwritten on cream paper in her precise, architectural script. She said she had been trying to reach me for 22 years. She said she was not angry. She said, and this is the sentence I have read 10,000 times since, the one I could recite to you right now word for word: I think you are a good man who made a very specific choice every single day for 22 years, and I have finally accepted that the choice was never going to be me. No accusation in it. That was the unbearable part. Pure, clear observation. The way a scientist writes a conclusion. She had already spoken to Daniel. He knew before I did. I sat in the kitchen for a long time that evening with that note in my hand. Then my phone rang, an investor in Boston, something urgent, and I answered it. I answered it. For 15 years after Margaret left, I told myself a story. The story was this: Daniel would come around. People come around. He was young, he was angry, he had his mother's version of events lodged in him like a splinter, and time has a way of softening these things. I had seen it in other families' estrangements that closed, fathers and sons who found their way back to each other over a grandchild or a health scare or simply the passage of enough years that the sharp edges wore down to something bearable. I believed this the way I believed in contracts. Firmly. Without examining the fine print. I sent checks on his birthday every year. 5,000, then 10,000 as the years went on. I told myself this was keeping the door open. I understand now that it was the only language I had ever learned, that I was, even in my attempts at repair, still doing the only thing I knew how to do. Turning everything into a transaction. Trying to fund my way back into a relationship I had never actually built. He cashed the first 3 checks. After that they came back uncashed, no note, no explanation. Just the check, returned in a plain envelope with his handwriting on the front. His handwriting, which I realized I barely recognized. My own son's handwriting, and I had to look at it for a moment to be certain it was his. I kept every one of those returned checks in a manila folder in my desk drawer. I don't know why. I still have them. The years moved the way years do when you fill them with work quickly, and without texture. I turned 70. I turned 75. I sold the third company in 2012, and for the first time in 41 years I had nowhere to be on a Monday morning, and the silence of that was so complete and so foreign that I hired a consultant within 3 weeks just to have calls on my calendar again. Just to have somewhere to point myself. My doctor told me in 2015 that my heart was showing the early architecture of failure. Not a crisis, not yet, but a direction. He used that word direction, and I remember thinking it was a strange word for a medical conversation. But it was the right word. A direction. The way a ship moves towards something it cannot yet see but is already aimed at. I called Daniel that evening. First time in 6 years that I had dialed his number. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen, same house, I had never moved. I think some part of me believed that staying in the same place was a form of faithfulness, and I listened to it ring. He answered on the 4th ring. The sound of his voice after 6 years was like a physical thing. Low, careful, a man's voice fully formed, nothing of the boy left in it that I could find. He said, "Hello." Just that. Waiting. I had prepared something. I had actually written notes on a yellow legal pad, like a business call, like a man who had no other way of approaching the most important conversation of his life except to treat it like a negotiation. I looked at my notes and every word on the page turned to dust. I said, "Daniel, it's Dad. I've been thinking about I wanted to, and then something happened in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. Something gave way. 81 years old, and I made a sound I had not made since I was a child. I want to be precise here because precision is all I have left. It was not crying exactly. It was something before crying. The thing that lives underneath all the years of not crying, finally coming through the floor." There was silence on the line. Then Daniel said, very quietly, "I know, Dad." 3 words. I know, Dad. Not forgiveness. Not the opening of a door. Just acknowledgement that he could hear what I could not say, that he had perhaps been waiting for it for a long time, that some part of him had always known this call would eventually come and had prepared himself for it the way you prepare for something you need to survive rather than something you want. I sat with those 3 words for a long time. We spoke for 22 minutes. I know because I looked at the call log afterward, the way I had always tracked time in units, in billable increments, in the currency of minutes. 22 minutes after 23 years of near silence. He was careful with me. Not warm, not cold. Careful. The way you handle something fragile that has already been dropped once. He said he lived in Portland now. He said he had a daughter, her name was Clara, she was 4 years old. He said the words "my daughter" and something in the architecture of my chest shifted permanently. I had a granddaughter named Clara who was 4 years old, and I had not known she existed. He did not say this as an accusation. He said it the way his mother had written that note 20 years earlier as a fact, cleanly stated, no editorializing. This is what is true. This is where we are. We hung up with a vague agreement to talk again soon. He called once more, 3 weeks later. We spoke for 11 minutes. Then the call stopped. I waited. I called twice, both times it went to voicemail, both times I left messages that I spent an hour composing and that he never returned. The last time I dialed his number, a year after that first call, I got a message saying the number had been changed. I sat with the dead phone in my hand for a very long time. That was the moment. Not the divorce, not the missed championships, not the 22 years of unanswered kitchen conversations. This a disconnected number, a Tuesday afternoon, sunlight coming through the kitchen window at a low winter angle, the phone saying nothing in my hand. This was the invoice. Final. No further correspondence. I want to give what happened to me a precise name. Not workaholism, that word is too clean, too clinical, it belongs in a self-help book, and this is not a self-help story. Not ambition either, because ambition implies a destination, and I never had a destination. I just had more. More was the destination. More was always exactly one deal ahead of wherever I currently stood. What I had was a substitution. I want you to sit with that word. A substitution is what happens when something essential is missing and you fill the space with something that resembles it closely enough that you can avoid noticing the difference. I was afraid, and I understand this only now, at 92, with the particular clarity that arrives when there is no longer any reason to lie to yourself. I was afraid that if I stopped, if I sat still, if I closed the laptop and put down the phone and just sat in a room with my wife and my son and nothing between us but air, they would see something in me that I did not want seen. Something unfinished. Something that had never learned how to simply be present without performing. Work was the performance. Work I was extraordinary at. Work gave me a script, a role, clear metrics for success. At work I always knew if I was winning. At home I never knew. And not knowing terrified me in a way that closing a $2 million deal never did. So I substituted. Every time the discomfort of intimacy rose up, every time Margaret started that careful, rehearsed sentence at the dinner table, every time Daniel stood at the back door in his socks watching me walk laps in the cold, I picked up the phone. I went to the office. I found the deal. I chose the thing I was good at over the thing that required me to be uncertain, unscripted, possibly inadequate. I did this for 40 years. Here is the tool I want to give you, not a philosophy, not a principle, but a single question you can use tonight, tomorrow morning, any moment you are standing at the fork I stood at every day for 4 decades and always took the wrong path. What am I substituting right now, and what am I afraid to feel if I stop? That is it. That is the entire instrument. It is not comfortable to use. It will not make you feel good. But it will tell you the truth, and the truth, even when it arrives 40 years too late, is the only thing that still has any value. I think about Clara. My granddaughter, 4 years old in 2015, which means she is 14 now. She does not know I exist. Or perhaps she does, perhaps Daniel has told her something, some careful, edited version, the way you explain difficult things to children. Perhaps she knows there is a grandfather somewhere who was very busy. Perhaps she has already absorbed, at 14, the same flat acceptance her father learned at 14, that some people are simply weather. Present sometimes. Gone mostly. Not worth building plans around. That thought sits in me like a stone in cold water. It does not move. It does not dissolve. It is simply there, every morning, when I come downstairs to a kitchen where no one sits. You are reading this and somewhere in you, I know because I know this feeling from the inside, somewhere in you a voice is already constructing the rebuttal. The voice is saying, but my situation is different. I am doing this for my family. When things stabilize, when this project closes, when the kids are older, when we get through this year, I know that voice. I invented that voice. I refined it over 4 decades into something so convincing that I never once heard it as a lie. It sounded, every single time, like reason. Like responsibility. Like love, even. It was none of those things. It was fear wearing the costume of ambition. Here is what I want to ask you, not tell you, ask you, and I want you to answer it honestly, not to me, but to yourself. Right now, in whatever room you are sitting in, when was the last time your child told you something important and you were fully there for it? No phone face down on the table, no part of your mind already in tomorrow's meeting, fully, completely, unreservedly there, not last week. Not in general. Specifically. A date. A moment. Can you see it? If you can, hold on to it. Water it. It is rarer than you think. If you cannot, if you reach for it and find only a vague impression, a blur, something that might have been a Tuesday evening or might have been a Thursday, you're not sure, it all runs together, then you already know what I am telling you, and you have known it for longer than you are comfortable admitting. I am not asking you to quit your job. I am not asking you to stop building things. I built things and the building was real and the pride was real, and I do not entirely regret the work itself. What I regret is the substitution. What I regret is every single moment I chose the script over the silence, the deal over the dinner table, the performance over the terrifying, necessary vulnerability of simply sitting with the people who needed nothing from me except my presence. Presence. The one thing that costs nothing and that I spent 40 years refusing to give. My granddaughter is 14 years old. She has her father's birthday March 14th, which means she was born in the spring, probably when the trees were just beginning. I imagine she has opinions about things. I imagine she is funny, or serious, or both. I imagine there are things she is afraid of and things she loves and a particular way she laughs that I will never hear. I have 2.4 million and I would give every dollar of it, every wire transfer, every closed deal, every color-coded calendar block, every night in a hotel in Boston and Dallas and Phoenix. I would give all of it without hesitation for one afternoon in a kitchen somewhere in Portland, Oregon, with a 14-year-old girl who knows my name. Not my net worth. My name. There is a phone on my kitchen counter. It has been there for 7 years. I leave it on the counter specifically, not in my pocket, not in my office, because some part of me, the part that is still capable of hope at 92, believes that one morning it will ring and the name on the screen will be Daniel. It has not rung with that name. But I leave it there. I look at it every morning when I come downstairs. I look at it the way I used to look at the market numbers first thing, before coffee, before anything else. Except now I am not looking for a gain. I am looking for something I cannot buy back and cannot negotiate and cannot close with the right words in the right sequence to the right person in the right city. I am looking for a Tuesday that went differently. The wire transfer was $340,000. I remember the exact number because I checked the confirmation 3 times that afternoon to make sure it had cleared. 3 times. I checked it 3 times while my son's call went to voicemail, while the phone rang and rang in my pocket, while Daniel, 31 years old, whatever it was he needed to say still in his mouth, waited and then stopped waiting and then, somewhere in the silence of me not answering, made a decision that has not changed in 19 years. I do not know what he was calling to say. I have turned that question over in my hands every day since. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. Maybe it was the beginning of something that could have been repaired, if I had just picked up the other phone, the one that mattered, and said, "I'm here." 2 words. Against 340,000. I chose the money. I want you to think about what is ringing in your pocket right now while you are busy checking something else. I want you to think about who is standing at a back door in their socks, watching you walk laps in the cold, waiting for you to hold up something other than one finger. Because here is what 92 years have taught me, and it is the only thing I know with absolute certainty: the wire always clears. The call doesn't always come back.